Okay, I think that means we are live, Matt. So, first of all, welcome to everyone. The first show of we have startup conversations. Really excited about this one. I actually post on LinkedIn, which isn't my normal thing to do, saying we're starting off with a bang, and we really are. So, Matt, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Rod. I really appreciate the invite. And we've known each other for quite a long time now. And so I think this is a great opportunity. And by the way, I've been a CG architect, sort of subscriber and in the community for, I think I looked about 20 years or so now. So it's
Oh,
pretty amazing.
nice. There's definitely some deep history. Believe it or not, I actually did some architectural work for Matt, and then actually
Mm,
Matt did some development work for
totally.
me. So things go really far back, which is actually a lot of fun. You don't have that often. So I suppose with any good show, you should start with introductions and say actually who we are and what we're going to be up to here. So I'm Roderick Bates. My day job is being senior director of product operations at Chaos Software. But one of the things I really like about that particular role is it requires me to be engaged on a lot of different topics. And one of them is tracking the industry and what new technology comes up and what are the ones we should be watching, one of the ones maybe we should be a little bit nervous about. And so this show is exactly that. It's really about tracking that new technology is coming out there. And then also understanding, what's the team, what's the culture, what's um, sort of the vitality that's behind these startups. And so for the first conversation on that topic, I invited Matt Jezyk as our guest from Motif. So Matt,
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. So my name is Matt Jezyk. I'm an architect by background. As Rod mentioned, we've worked together before when he was at here in Timberlake. And my background, I started in architecture and went practiced for a number of years up in Boston and in the Philadelphia area, and then got into a small startup software company. It was a bunch of really smart Russian mathematicians and in the suburbs of Boston, and that turned into, it was called Charles River Software, and that turned into Revit. So we worked on the initial thing. Hot take, like I'm actually old. Like Rod, you and I are like we're no spring chickens anymore.
I
So we've
know, I
been
don't
around.
know when that happened. I'm a little disappointed by it.
But that's okay. Like, I mean, it's not even about age. It's like I always tell people, like, especially from the working out standpoint, like it's not about age, it's about your mileage, right? So like how do you, number one, keep engaged and informed and like creative and like excited about these things? Like, and that's what I want to talk about today. So like my history, did a bunch of Revit stuff, got acquired by Autodesk, did a bunch of things there. Um, and built basically the Revit thing. And then beyond that into computational design, optimization, fabrication, all that kind of stuff. And then I took off from Autodesk and went into manufacturing. So my industry background in architecture and design spanned into making things in the manufacturing space. So building electric vehicle factories, working on the design and the development of whole new projects that are actually, I'm super excited to see like the number of like say for example like Model Y cars that are out in the world today.
Yeah, you
When
didn't
I
drop a name there, but yeah, it was
it,
Tesla, right? If I recall
it,
correctly.
it was, yeah. So, and it's a little polarizing these days. So, but I think I was
Well, it
there.
wasn't then, so let's
Exactly
let's
right.
not
So
worry
like
about it.
still on the mission. So like I think it's the mission towards sustainable energy and sort of transportation is still a real thing. Um, and I'm glad and honored to be part of that process of scaling like from the things, and we'll talk about that in the terms of startup too. How do you take something that's like a baseline, it's good, and then how do you put a little bit more gas and accelerant on that, and then hockey stick it up, like in whatever means, like to get to like more adoption, more production, more whatever. So that's what I was able to do, like at Tesla, and then also after that at Rivian, building factories, like taking a core
Oh, I didn't know
product.
it was Rivian as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
So anyway.
actually, I'm kind of
Mhm,
curious. Maybe just a little bypass here, but
mhm.
what's the common thread between electric vehicle manufacturing that allows you to go from Tesla to Rivian? You weren't going from like Tesla to GM or something like that. It was, two
Exactly.
electric vehicles. Is there something about that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the easiest answer is like the people that I would we all a lot of us worked together at Tesla beforehand, and the people that I would have liked to work with again ended up all at Rivian. So they were like, hey, we need somebody to do that.
Yeah.
And actually, the short another aside there, we're going to have a lot of these. Is a lot of this actually goes back to foundational things that you were involved with in Kieran Timberlake. So how do we do mass customization? How do we think about architecture through the lens of like something that is manufacturable as a product, like that's the story arc that I think is interesting for me. Like that's what's passionate
Well,
for
how
me is
does
like,
that relate? So when you think about a facility like this, right, you're providing a
mhm,
manufacturing facility
mhm,
that is providing or developing something that's mass customized, the car in a
mhm,
sense. But the facility itself, in my simplistic view of manufacturing facilities, isn't necessarily like that. Are
mhm.
there actually elements that are like that? Like, are these being designed so they're sort of infinitely flexible for different types of production runs and things like that?
They are. Yeah, these are not your father's factory. These are number one, one of the philosophies at these places is thinking about the factory as a product, like thinking about the literally the coining the term gigafactory in a repeatable play and treating that as a product that you could iterate and make better and deploy in different places. That's at the meta level. And then inside of the factory, instead of making static things that are like, whatever, 200, $300 million of investment, making them modular, making them adaptable because things change so frequently. Like when I was growing up, there was a GM plant and like a Chrysler plant, I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware. And those things would shut down for like almost a year. It would be like 8 months of retooling to do the next thing. Now
Oh,
you can't afford
yeah.
that. Like you have to do that fast. You have 2 or 3 weeks downtime. So how do you redesign things to be much more modular and flexible, which ties it into the adaptability, like designing for adaptability. But
It brings an interesting idea, though, and you think, obviously, this is totally off topic, but
yeah,
I
right.
was reading an article that was sort of like, okay, where's the opportunity for AWS kind of thinking for manufacturing, where
Hmm.
a facility itself isn't even dedicated necessarily to cars or not?
Hmm.
Is there an opportunity where you actually start to, particularly leveraging, say, more advanced and sophisticated robotics and things like that, to actually have a facility that you can produce a lot of different things,
Totally.
depending upon what you want that outcome to be.
Yep.
Right now, even one of these factories that's sort of extensible in a way, you're still making a car, right? You're not switching, but maybe they're already thinking that way. Maybe they're thinking,
Mhm.
well, today it's cars, tomorrow it's going to be, humanoid robots. I don't know.
Exactly. I mean that is the concept of like a modular assembly line. Like there's a company called Bright Machines that was doing that kind of work. There's a couple other startups in that space, and there are venture capital people that are investing heavily in that interface between like making manufacturing much more adaptable, like software. So that AWS example is like super apt for it at this moment.
Yeah,
Um,
it kind of
yeah,
thinks you about architecture, though, right? Growing families moved.
totally.
You have different jobs. You work from home now. You don't work from home. There's a need on the architectural
Mhm.
side, even on a small scale,
Mhm.
for people to think along those lines. But
Yeah, but
that's a nice little segue. But let's get
yeah,
back to okay. So you worked in
yeah,
automotive, yeah, doing
exactly.
manufacturing facilities, and then what
And
happens?
then, so what happened? So we were building stuff at Rivian, and then one of my old bosses, Amar Hansball, who's now our CEO at Motif, called me up. He's like, "Hey, we're gonna do this thing. We're gonna do a startup. I need your help. Let's think about that. Let's think about the opportunities in that space. Like, what do we want to do?" And a lot of that turned into what we are building, what we have built so far, and what we are currently building in Motif, which is it's really kind of a generational play. So instead of using literally something like Revit that's 25 years old now, or Rhino or AutoCAD or SketchUp, like these are all old. These things are all old enough to not just drive or vote, but to rent cars and get mortgages. Like they're 25,
That's
30
right.
years
Yeah,
old
yeah.
now.
They can actually rent a real car, not just a
Exactly right.
U-Haul. Yeah.
So, and you think about how the world is changing, and we'll get into this a little bit more. It's time. Like if you look at how our world has changed over the last 10 years, the number of things you're doing on your phone and online these days, the accepted kind of common practice of using cloud technologies, and now increasingly AI. How does that, the cultural changes and things that are happening in our daily lives, how does that manifest in our industry, in the architecture, engineering, and construction space? I mean, you know this, like it's like pretty much it's basically still filling out PDFs and
It
forms and
is. I mean, we were actually having an internal meeting on this various topics. We were actually talking about like a drawing set, and it's like they
Mhm.
haven't really changed in about 100 years. And I was like, actually, they have changed. They've gone from being 30 pages to 300 or 30 to
Exactly.
3,000. That's probably the only change I've seen.
And part of that is my fault. Like that's the
Yeah,
Revit
I
thing
know.
is it
Thank you,
made it
Revit. Yeah.
it made it a little easier to make sections and plan views and like call out all these things. And obviously that's a lot of this is we're in a very litigious industry too, but
Yes.
there was an economy and an efficiency before putting together drawing sets when you had to think about it.
Mhm.
Now, it's a little too easy to just drop more things on a
I mean,
sheet.
that's sort of the AI
Mhm.
complaint as well. I mean, the number of times I get a report from someone and it's 12 pages. I'm like, oh, I know you didn't write 12 pages.
Exactly. we're actually in the AI thing. I'm sure we'll talk about a lot more, but I kind of feel like it's almost like the opposite of like zipping something up now. Like it used to be like, hey, Rod, I'm going to send you 12 files. I'm going to compress them. I'm going to make them smaller. Now it's like the
Yes, yes.
opposite of that. It's the
I know.
expansion.
And then
Like
you
I
just
have,
take it, dump it into AI, and be like, "Can you give me the summary?"
and that's your AI is going to talk to my
Uh,
AI, right? Like, so I take
I
like
know.
a
That's
one
yeah. How do you
page.
keep yourself in the loop? That's the important thing.
Yeah, right. So yeah, but back on the overall thing. So we formed this company called Motif about a little more than 3 years ago, and you can fit it into the kind of BIM 2.0 ish sort of space. There's an opportunity in this area. There's an opportunity to build something new that
Hmm.
solves for the problems in the industry more efficiently, that takes advantage of all the new technologies we have, and kind of works the way that people are expecting to work these days.
So that gives you, I guess, you think about it. You're going up against a huge incumbent, which is great that you created the incumbent, or at least involved in its
I was
genesis.
part of it.
Pretty,
Yeah, I
yeah,
did.
pretty significantly.
Mhm.
And that's kind of a wild thing. So do you feel like that your knowledge of Revit is really helpful for you? I mean, it's almost like the ultimate competitor analysis in some ways. Are you using that as sort of a primary target, or are you actually thinking, no, we're even thinking beyond trying to displace Revit. We're thinking even bigger than that.
I think it's more the latter. I mean, the danger, I mean, you can talk about this from a generational standpoint. You can talk about it from the domain knowledge standpoint. Like those are all powerful assets, but they can also be liabilities. They can lock your thinking into literally old world thought process or
Mhm.
25-year-old things. Like back in my day, we did it this way. So the benefit in this company is that obviously it's not just me. Like we have a lot of really, really smart people working on this problem, but that we come from different spaces. Like we have some AEC kind of tech CAD people. Oops. Oh, shoot. Uh,
There, Matt, are you there?
okay. I think I'm back.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Um, yeah, there's something with the Wi-Fi. Yeah, so we have AEC tech people, but we also have people that have built games for the web and for mobile devices, and we have people that have built deep back-end infrastructure for the cloud. So how do you put different people together with different skill sets and say, go solve this problem? We're not going to tell you exactly how to do it, but here's roughly like my job is like, here's the hill we need to take.
Yeah.
It needs to roughly do this, but I'm not going to tell you how to do that because there's many different ways to do it.
So let's go back to that statement actually, and then I kind of want to go from there and cascade down. But we wanted to kind of introduce the technology, and you said, well, it's like it's BIM 2.0, generational
Mhm.
shift. But fundamentally, if like really, what are some of the core functionalities that Motif is targeting ultimately, and then where do you see yourself today, and then how do those what you have today kind of take you to where you want to be?
Sure. Let me just do a quick little now
Uh,
word from our sponsor here. Um, so
Not really a sponsor, in case anyone's curious, actually.
yeah. Uh, so yeah, I mean, and thank you for the invite for coming in. Okay, so I think you
Absolutely,
can see my
I
screen,
can.
perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So basically, I'm from a company called Motif, Motif.io. Take a look at it. What we are is a brand new startup. Well, not brand new anymore. We've been working on these things for 3 years, but we launched our first product about a year ago. And we've been working with premier architects and engineers around the world. You can
And
see some
and
of the
hired
names.
and hired some I saw actually. You have Jens from Big, like
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. So we've got we're working with a lot of people, and the thing is, even before we started any software, we worked with a core group of people. We used to call them early adopters. Now we just call them like design partners or advisors.
Yeah, it's a pretty
That
solid list of names you got scrolling
yeah.
across the bottom. I'm impressed.
So, but we said, hey, look, we're going to do this thing. We're going to, like the longer term play is obviously building the Revit thing. And they said, great. While you're doing that, we're with you. We're on that journey with you. But we have a short term problem, which is literally there are people post pandemic that are using these kind of infinite canvasy tools like Miro and Mural and
Yeah.
Figma. Like there's a phenomenon there in architecture, right? So like take people that are heavily visual, heavily critique based and collaborative, and how do you digitize that
Yeah,
process?
I mean, you're
Like,
taking the sort of the pinup, if you will,
mhm.
the review pinup and making that digital for sure. And
Yeah,
that is absolutely part and parcel of the design process.
And that was really the essence of like the first thing we wanted to do while we're building a platform
So
is
this
like,
is
hey,
almost
look.
like a module of what you're seeing
Mhm,
being a larger piece. So we're actually only seeing
mhm.
a little slice of what's going to become a much larger ecosystem then.
Exactly. Yeah. And I can show some other stuff real quick, but that was kind of like the quick overview. So high level, I'll skip through some of these things, but really think about it generationally, like I said before, where the industry today is, pretty much single player, isolated desktop machines, very siloed information, hard to collaborate, and pretty old tech, old UI, doesn't
Yeah, I mean,
really
that's why I
think.
noticed you said you have people from gaming. I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
there's a whole generation, like their expectations on UI is going to be absolutely predicated upon
Mhm.
experience playing games when they're younger.
Exactly. And think about that. Like I mean, like I said, we're both a little bit older. So like I have two
You don't have
kids
to keep
and
saying that. It's okay.
but my oldest son is graduating college this year and he's not an architect. He's doing music and music tech kind of stuff. So similar to like architecture and design and tech. Um, his view of the world, he grew up as a digital native. He was playing Minecraft when he was in seventh grade. He was coding in Minecraft without even knowing it. He was doing Roblox and all that other stuff. His expectations for how technology works and how his thought process works is different than ours.
Absolutely.
Case in point, like another friend of ours, this guy Nick Cameron from Perkins and Will, he's got a similar case where he was trying to teach his daughter coming out of college Revit, and she handed it back to him and said, "Dad, it's broken." And he said, "What do you mean?" "Well, I clicked the button a minute ago and nothing happened yet." So like there's an expectation around immediacy and getting
Mm.
into something and always on. And he's like, no, it's not broken. You just have to wait for it to start up. And then you got to open a file. And then you got to do the, it's like, they're just like, I'm
Yeah, you're
done.
like,
I don't,
nah. Yeah.
yeah. So how do we address that? I mean, and that's basically what it comes down to. So we're building a brand new platform that is inherently multiplayer and collaborative. It's cloud native. It's all on the web. You can access your data. That's another thing that's actually really important these days is um, in some of the larger incumbents that are out there, it's hard to get to your data. It's hard to access it. It's hard to get the things that are really your IP that really you should get access to. It's hard to connect to them. It's hard to integrate your other tools.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole ecosystem of tools whose basic function is extracting data out of Revit for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are kind of like there was
So when
a
you look at, I
sentiment.
look at this list here.
Mhm.
So for those who may be just listening, right? There's a list that we're looking through here of various technology, or basically of sort of functional imperatives. Maybe I would describe them. And
Mhm.
I'm curious, when you look at this list, are these non-negotiables? Would you say like if you don't have cloud native, or you don't have open data access, or you don't have a clean and modern UI, is a tool going to fail? Yeah, in this modern environment, would you say all of these things are essential to have a successful tool today?
I think it's important to go where people are and to solve problems based on how people think about the world. And that's what we did. So we came back and said, you know what? It probably doesn't make sense to build a desktop application right now. Like if we don't have to,
I
and
know
maybe there
that's
are
one of the
reasons.
things, right? If you were doing a startup and you were trying
Hmm.
to pitch it, and you were like, okay, so here's how it works. You download it, install it, and run it
Hmm.
locally. I can't see anyone saying like, yes, here's a check.
I mean, it's kind of like saying like, look, I have a Commodore 64 that we're going to use. You know what I mean? It's like, well, like why, like just make it work in the cloud, it's
Yeah.
just like, so there's certainly expectations in the venture community, but there's also expectations from users. Like
Oh yeah. I mean, the two
and
overlap, right?
even like, I mean, you've seen that in chaos too. It's like
Uh,
you have a mix of, desktop kind of applications you need to install, and then also ones that are more cloud native. So I think there's a lot of reasons for that. But yeah, I think that I would see it hard to start a company that doesn't have these attributes these days. And these are ones that we hold pretty true, especially the ease of access, the approachability, clean modern UI, and then access to your data. I mean, those are just kind of what people want.
Now, when you say access to the data, though, you can get access to your data, but that immediately to me says you have to have a level of technical acumen that maybe
Mhm.
undermines this ease of use component.
Mhm.
When you say open access to data, is that only for sophisticated users, or are you imagining workflows that maybe people that aren't so sophisticated can actually access and utilize their data in new ways?
I think, yeah, especially in today's world, it's a lot easier to access information than ever before. Like you think about how AI and, MCPs and
Oh,
LLMs,
it's
like all this stuff.
wild.
Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's like you don't need to be this like digital high priest that knows how to like write to hit an API that's like REST based or something. Like you just ask a
Yeah,
question
you
like,
say what
hey,
you want, and then it'll walk through
yeah,
and actually develop it in the
exactly.
API to do so.
Yeah, so that's what we're seeing now. Is clearly that we have APIs for these things, but exposing them in a way that makes sense to people might not look the way that it did to make a Revit plugin or talk to AutoCAD or something. It's going to be cloud native, and that's just, we think about these things in terms of connectors.
Hmm.
It's just a common pattern, right? If you use Claude or use Cursor or if you use anything else, you don't even have to think about the technology anymore. You just say, I want to connect to Notion or Slack or Teams or whatever, and that just happens. You know what I mean?
I know. I just say for people listening, if you haven't done that, like just get into Claude and say, you want to do that. You want to actually do a vibe coding exercise of some
Mhm.
sort. Actually, like the other day, I built an app that basically created a sort of a weather checker. Then it would be posted via an API, like a go, no go, that would be tied to my alarm, and it would only go off under certain conditions. Well
Totally.
outside of my technical capability, but I was
Yeah.
able to do it, which was wild, and it works.
And we can talk. I totally want to riff on the vibe coding thing too, but yeah, in terms of what we mean around the open collaboration, like that's another aspect of this. Like what I'm showing on the screen now is this is the Motif design review application. You can easily share. You can create your own stuff. Do the kind of
Hmm.
normal design exploration, ideation, 2D and 3D information all together, just like literally a digital whiteboard like you were talking about before. How do you get the team together to explore an idea? And that could be a precedent, it could be a sketch, it could be a 3D artifact or a detail that you had 3 years ago or whatever. Just throw it all together in a whiteboard, and collaborate. Like you can come together and share easily. Like, I mean, imagine like the number of times that you had to like create a presentation and print it out, make a book, send it somewhere else. Like now you can just send a link to
Oh
somebody and they
yeah, I
can
say I'm
use it.
not printing too much these days, but yeah, no, I'm with you. But
Yeah.
here's the other question that I would ask: a
Mhm.
lot of that, I'm a lot of tools like our tools, for instance. We think about we're trying to align with the customer needs
Mhm.
at Chaos, and those are tools that are trying to serve that AEC community, primarily the A.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, they're also using our tools to create content that is absolutely 100% for the facilitation of communication with the client.
Mhm.
And that's someone who actually we never really get to talk to. So
Mhm.
in some ways, the primary consumer for the outputs from our software is someone who's kind of like this sort of this mystery entity that we know is out there, but we don't get to engage with.
Mhm.
And so I think about a tool like this, it's serving this well, more than dual function, but you're using it for internal collaboration. I could absolutely see this as part of a design review. But then as you're saying, the whole point of maybe bypassing the traditional presentation creation process here is that you could present to clients and collaborate with them
Mhm.
in ways
Totally.
that don't require the creation of slides and whatnot. How do
Exactly.
you get feedback or understand the client? Because that's a tough crowd to meet. You scrolled through those logos at the beginning that
Mhm.
you have as initial customers, but I imagine they don't let you get in front of the clients too often to kind of get feedback and understand how they think or operate or what skill sets they have when it comes to sort of UI comprehension or navigation.
Totally. I mean, I think, number one, we're big proponents of what's called just user-centered design. So thinking about the user experience first, before we even get into the technology.
Hmm.
Before we even had a line of code, we had basically a storyboard for these kind of things that laid out these concepts, and we took them in front of not just architects, but in front of owners and clients as well. And that is a big barrier to your point. People that are less technical or less 3D native, I guess, have a tough time understanding what you're talking about.
They do, but
Um,
they also have a wealth of experience that gives them a
mhm.
certain expectation. They've been using iPads or,
Mhm.
they navigate diagrams at the New York Times or something like that, that
Mhm.
they have an expectation of what it should be like to engage this content. And they
Exactly.
don't, I would say that there was an era where people would expect like an architect to show them something and maybe they don't fully understand, but the architect is you use the term sort of the high priest. But now
Mhm.
what I'm looking at what you have on the screen right here, it's a 3D view, totally legible. I understand exactly what that building looks like. It's a pretty cool building, by the way.
Oh,
Um,
thanks.
and it's something where I can imagine from a client's perspective, this makes a lot more sense. Is
Mhm.
this something where have you been able to get this in front of, that particular user group for
We
feedback?
have. Yeah, absolutely. So I think, I mean, I kind of see it as like layers of an onion. Like number one, we have to solve problems, relevant problems for the designers, right? So like that's the entry point. Like, and we can talk about like the evolution of like, a company and like
Mhm.
getting out in front of customers and building that rapport and community. But like, if it's not solving a problem for immediate designer or, the principal in charge or the project manager, no one's going to use it. If it's not easy to understand, it's not easy to get into, no one's going to use it. So that's why we focused on ease of use for the team first. So even before we get to the client or the owner,
It's
one of
got
the
to be easy,
problems.
ease of use for the team. And what's interesting here,
Mhm,
though, is ease of use. Do you feel like there's different standards? Because if they're used to using Revit already, like imagine everyone you're talking to is already using Revit.
mhm.
Is that correct?
Everyone at a technical
Everyone, all your
level,
customers,
yeah,
all the firms, right? They're
yeah,
all
yeah. Clearly, like they're all adopting Revit, but the challenge, Rod, is like, I mean, you've seen this. Like, if you're a partner in a company, you're not in front of these tools. Maybe you were technical before. Like, take a guy like our friend Matt
well, you were
Crystal.
asking me what kind of computer I use during the
Yeah,
prep here, right? You can tell I'm not doing any heavy lifting with the computer I have.
yeah. So imagine you're a principal partner, you're on the go. You land, you're gonna go do a pitch, and you need to know from your team, okay, did you update the presentation that I gave you feedback on Friday or whatever Thursday, and I'm gonna land on Monday. Where is it? Do I have the current stuff? Am I prepared to have a good conversation with our client? And usually there's a gap between the people that are technical and
Hmm.
making the thing and the people that are responsible for the company and the business and kind of selling the thing or communicating to the client and delivering on
I
what
see. So
they.
ease of use matters more. Obviously,
Yeah,
I guess I should have known this, right? Ease of use matters more to some audiences than others.
totally. So what we found is that we can get like this, the UI on the front, for those of you that are on the visual side of this, the UI on the right-hand side is Motif. The UI on the left is Revit. And like I said, Revit's a fairly capable, competent tool, but it's fairly complex these days.
There's a lot of
What if
buttons.
Yeah, like a lot of buttons. What if you had 9 buttons? So in Motif, you literally have the ability to share into a neutral space that anybody can access with a link. And that's really cool because it's inviting, it's inclusive. And what we've seen is that you don't just come and spin around the model, you start marking it up, you start adding comments, you start doing stuff that's like, no, 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 that's wrong. I think we should do it this way. That making that possible and making it collaborative, like not just with Revit, but here we have like a Rhino model, they're all aggregating together, not just for like a design clash review, Navisworks kind of thing. It's just more aggregation of that
Hmm.
information to talk about the design, bringing
I
in,
like it. This is
the
something I had used.
context.
I remember we had some concepts like this,
Hmm.
and some capabilities are similar, but maybe not
Hmm.
as robust as this. But I
Hmm.
always liked it to akin to walking through a building with a can of spray paint, and
Yeah,
you're like, I can sort of circle this and say this and whatnot, and it's a very different way of engaging the design, but it brings up a different paradigm of
hmm,
engagement. So you've been talking a little bit about, principals and partners maybe do design review, but it sounds
hmm.
like clients may actually be similarly engaging with a model like this.
Exactly. And that's the next layer of that onion. Like, you got to solve a real problem for the design team. Make sure that like it's like in this case, it's a lot of it is model collaboration, model review. We have cases like a lot of live projects right now. I was just in New York last week where the team is actively working in Rhino and Revit like this, and
Mhm.
they're coordinating in an ad hoc way. It's not a formal like clash detection thing. It's just more like, hey, let's go figure out how to do this detail. And what they can do is figure out, like in this case, say this is like a Rhino canopy and like a Revit facade. How are we going to connect them together so they can collaborate, mark things up, sketch, add comments, and more importantly, those comments show back up in the native design tool. So if you're like a Revit person or a Rhino person that's doing 12 hours a day modeling, you don't even need to leave your tool. Like your boss basically says, "Hey, can you change this?" And you can
Yeah.
communicate directly.
It's like having the person come over your shoulder as your design, but you're seeing it all
Yeah,
together. So I'm
yeah,
curious, not to keep going back to this
yeah.
client one, but I find that
Hmm.
you talk about sort of cultural shifts.
Hmm.
Are you hearing from the customers here that are using it so far that the way that clients expect to engage the design process is shifting? I think there
They
was a
are.
time where it's pretty passive, right? It's like every 2 weeks you presented, it was a very tight presentation, but all something like
Mhm.
this is like you're giving a lot more access all of a sudden to a client.
Which, props to, Enscape, of course, for that. Like,
Mhm.
I think that there were, at least in my mind, like there was a pivotal moment probably about 10 years ago where people started using Enscape for real-time rendering, but also as a communication vehicle. The number of times where you literally have a person driving Revit, not showing that to the client and then just having the Enscape
Hmm.
view up was really a formative, like foundational thing that's happened. And that changes people's expectations about like the liveness of the information. And then I think going farther into, and I know, you know, you guys have presentation tools too, but like this is what people are expecting. Like the information should be up to date. Um, there's not like the whole idea like, oh yeah, I changed that rendering on Friday and I sent it to you in Teams or Slack or whatever. Like, why not just have it all in one spot? Like that's really
I
foundational,
mean,
I
there's
think.
almost a vulnerability that comes with that thinking, though. You know,
Hmm.
there's, I think, a tendency in architecture, like everything has to be really belabored. It's very precious.
Hmm.
You have to absolutely control what the client sees. You know, you don't want them to play architect and things like
Hmm.
that. This seems to be changing that quite a bit and making a for a process. I mean, obviously, you can make these very refined. You know, the boards you're showing here, you're very you can be more curated if you want, but there's this other side where it's you're getting a live window into the status of the project.
Exactly. And that's, I mean, we talk about it in terms of like you have a messy board. Like, you
Mhm.
know, design is messy. Like design is iterative and collaborative and like it's never linear. You always cycle, right? So how do you hold on to that in one spot? And people, if you look at somebody's, you know, Miro board or anything else, it's it's almost like looking at somebody's grasshopper script. It's like starts out clean and then all of a sudden it
I'm glad
expands
I'm
to the
not the
right.
only one.
Yeah, but it's really like an artifact of the design process, and that's okay. But trying to communicate the design intent in that messy space can be disorienting, and
Hmm.
that's where you kind of need to like literally pull a piece of paper on top and say, "Here's the I like that idea, that idea, that idea. Make some presentation out of that." But it's still connected. So it's both of those things. It's almost like if you had a dinner party at your house, right? There's always that one room in your house that you kind of declutter things into, like, and you're like, no, 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 don't open that door because you know things are gonna like that's what people do in the design
Yeah.
process. But everything else looks clean, and
Yeah.
that's what we've heard from people so far. By the way, this actually works really, really well with Enscape renderings, like and the other things obviously from Veris and the thing too. So we're seeing people mixing and matching and using the tools that they really appreciate and like together in a mashup kind of way. So
Yeah, and they probably the expectation is there shouldn't be any friction in that kind
mhm,
of cross tool usage. You know,
totally.
as you said, one of your key priorities there is that the what I think you said that the data access or
Hmm.
something like that,
Yeah,
right?
it's just
And
openness. Yeah.
openness, right? And I think that's the same thing. You know, this idea of the walled garden. It's
Hmm.
nice to think about in some ways, but I would say in some ways though that there's still ultimately a place where people want to have that data stored and secure, but
Hmm.
they want to be able to tap into it anytime they want. You know, it's like the
Yeah.
data itself can be protected, but access itself shouldn't be precious. Precious.
Exactly. Yeah. Like openness doesn't mean it's all out, like all your dirty laundry's out on the internet.
Yeah.
It just means that you can access it if you're authorized to.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. So this is, I mean, we're doing a deep dive, but as you were saying, this is just one part of the overall pie.
Hmm.
So where's the other pieces? You know, where are you going from here?
Well, I'm glad you asked. So, if you take a look at our actual website, and I didn't have a slide for this. So, one of the things that people, which was a surprise to me, and this is actually part of the fun startup journey thing. You know, we did the whole 3D thing. Like, we're all 3D people. Like, and but one of the things that people like said, hey, look, you know what we actually need is the ability to I need to see my deliverables. I need to see my sheets and my drawings and mark them up. And we're like, great, we can do that. So publishing not just 3D information, but 2D drawing sets, and literally letting people with actually, do I have it here? Yeah. Oh, one second. Uh, so, yeah, with an iPad, like
Yep.
literally, with an iPad Pro, like I want to sit there and just go through the set that I have.
And you can redline them.
Redline, you know, like all the like, you remember the times that we would like print out stuff?
Yeah, you
Like I
print
do
them out,
this
you
a
put them
lot.
up, and then you'd have the old timers come into the room. I guess that would be me now, right? And
Yeah,
then they'd mark them up.
exactly.
Yeah, and then
Yeah, so
the junior
that's
people would take them down and fix them.
exactly. So like that's kind of what we're seeing now. So the pickup that we're seeing is like clearly the 3D things, but even as like, you know, check sets or, you know, progress sets or whatever else like that, there are current processes and current tools for that that are great. But one thing that people want is that immediacy, seeing, do I have the right stuff? Can I mark it up easily? And can I communicate my design intent effectively as like a mentoring opportunity too?
Uh-huh.
You think about it that way. It's like, you know, the number of times you're like, no, 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 like that detail that I remember this thing. I'm going to draw it for you right now. And people are they're using stuff like Bluebeam. It's like drawing in PowerPoint. They're like, I'm going to
Yeah.
draw a full detail there. You mentioned that before. What if there was an easier way to do that? What if there was one that flowed back into your design tool better? That's kind of what we're seeing, is that there's a progression of these new, how do we, number one, go where our customers are asking us to go, which is the current Motif is like a collaboration tool, a design review tool that
Yep.
builds on top of where you are working, right? If you're
Hmm.
working in Revit or Rhino, you can stay there. We're not asking you to change anything. All you're doing is basically publishing and streaming that information in a way that your boss can see it, or your client can see it, or other people can see it. Your consultants can see it more easily.
And so when you think about that BIM 2.0,
Mhm,
what is, so you're here, this is more collaboration pieces, but it doesn't do
mhm,
what in my mind says, okay, BIM, what's a big part of
mhm,
it, right? It's geometry.
mhm.
Is that coming?
It is, and that, yeah, it's a little early to talk about that. In fact, tonight I'm gonna fly over to London to talk to some of our
Yeah.
partners next week about this stuff. So we are actively working on something there, and we talked about it at Martin Day's conference Next Build last year. So this is, we're in it. We're doing that stuff, but we need to make sure it works before we put something out.
No, it makes
Um,
total sense. But when you think about geometry,
mhm,
you're engaging in a very different way here, right? There's sort of an
mhm,
infinite canvas, 2D, 3D environment, complete
mhm.
markup, things like that. Are you thinking geometry creation in the same environment that you could potentially be doing the markups in and things like that?
Why
Is this?
not? I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
I mean,
yeah,
clearly architects think about, models. Like there's like, if you think about like, there's a difference between, a single family home and then like the subdivision that it sits in, right? So there's
uh
like some scoping and sort of, modularity of design that lends itself to, like discrete models that can be connected together. So you'll probably see something like that. You'll see tools that are flexible and creative. Like you're still going to end up with walls and windows and doors and floors and roofs and ceilings. Like
yeah.
that's just the nature of it. You'll still be able to have live drawings, like live sections and plans and things like that. And that's actually, I would throw that out there, is that you don't really have a BIM tool. Like we said this actually back in the Revit days. Like if everybody kind of said, okay, yeah, I can make drawings, but if you have to like extract information from the model, and literally like in Rhino, it's just called make 2D, like you're cutting something and making vectors and
Yeah.
putting them somewhere, those are dead. They're not connected anymore. You can't change the wall in the plan view and have it update everywhere else. So that's like foundational. And basically my tenet is like drawings are expressive. People think about drawings as a communication device, but also they are not derivative. Like, you should be able to edit them live.
You should be able to edit them until you're not, right? I mean,
Mhm.
that's part of the challenge too with
Yeah,
some of these is you want to have sort of a final drawing set. You're like, okay, this is the real deal. Until we
exactly.
have our as builds, right? But you have
Yeah.
something that's being used for bidding and things like that.
Yeah. So that's what we're working on, and just at a high level. There's a lot of things I can't talk about quite yet. It's a little too early, but stay tuned. But I think at a core level, geometry is super important. Presentation graphics are super important. Um, Line work, just the expressive things that people care about, super important. And actually, the biggest thing, Rod, that we've heard from people is just performance. Like, the number of times, and I say this like almost every time now, that I've been in an office and you have like a junior person that's trying to do something, they're under a deadline, they move something in Revit, and then all of a sudden their screen turns white because Revit's solving a really hard math problem and trying to figure out the whole
Yeah.
building. You've probably seen this a lot. And then their boss goes by, and their boss like looks at their screen like, oh, what's happening there? And it looks like they're not doing anything. He goes by, gets coffee, talks to somebody, comes back 5 minutes later, and the screen's still white. Like that's
Yeah. I
not a
mean,
good
in the
look.
services industry, that's death, right?
Yeah.
That's just lost time and lost efficiency that
So
matters in the
that's what
bottom
we're
line.
working on. So how can the design tool keep up with the speed of thought? How can we do the hard math problem in a different way? I think is an interesting thing to worry about. And that's one of the reasons why we came out with a tool at first that wasn't a design tool. I don't really want to build another conceptual design tool right now. I don't want to build a sugar cube modeler,
Yeah.
massing modeler. I want to build the hard thing, but ultimately solve a problem that is more approachable to the larger part of the industry, including working with, guys like in Chaos. Like all of us are in this together.
Yeah, either yeah. What do they say? There's a saying of like, either we're all in together, or was it we fight together, we hang together, sort of something
Yeah,
along those
right.
lines, right? It's things are
Hmm.
shifting really fast. So I have a question that maybe is a little
Hmm.
spicy, but I'm kind of curious,
Hmm.
right? You had the largest, I believe, Series A of any AEC software startup, at least according to AI. When I asked, what were the largest, and it said there's some other ones in AEC maybe that were larger, but none in AEC software. So
Hmm.
my question for you would be, when you come to that evaluation or that initial round of funding, which I think was 46 million or something like that, which is a
It
lot,
wasn't
right?
all in one shot. Yeah, it wasn't
Okay.
wasn't all in one shot,
Okay,
but
but it's
yeah.
a lot. It's a big number, right? It catches people by surprise.
Hmm.
When you think about that, do you feel like what you've described so far in this session
Hmm.
is enough to justify that, or is there more coming that is even bigger that you're not necessarily touching on?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, that's the aspiration. So just a little bit of the background, and I won't go too deep on that. But basically, these are all. We started the company 3.5, 3 and a quarter years ago now. Amar Hansball is our CEO. Brian
Mhm.
Matthews was heading up our engineering CTO. I'm doing product stuff, and then we have Lyra Nikolovska doing design. So we're all work together. We all work together at Autodesk. These guys work together at this company, Bright Machines, and we said, look, we're in this for a while. We're not building um, something that is a short term turnaround. Like this is a long haul. Building a generational platform tool requires building a platform. So that's basically the play. The thing that we can't do is also just rebuild Revit in the cloud.
No.
We have to think about AI. We have to think about how this next generation that we talked about before thinks about the world. Um, and also work deeply with a lot of our customers. So
Damn, Bill
to
said
do that,
that. This
mhm,
is a so. In
yeah,
case anyone's not, you can't see the
oh yeah,
screen. He has a
mhm,
quote here up there from Bill Carney at DLR, who's
yeah.
I'd say is probably in my short list of people who I have imminent respect for in the
Mhm.
industry.
Yeah, so Bill's a great guy. I had him on my little webcast a couple months ago. He's been a great supporter of our short-term mission and also long-term. Um, and high level, it really just comes down to how are we going to change the industry. So the reason why we started this company was to not just build a short-term product, it's to build something big. And that big thing can't just be modeling. It can't just be cloud. It can't just be whatever performance. It has to be other things. And where we're betting a lot is obviously on the AI side of things. There's
Yeah, that's what
so
I'm
much
curious
that's
about.
changing.
Because it's sort of like
Hmm.
okay, right now to get funding, you have to have AI in there somewhere, right? But
Right.
a lot what you've shown so far, there's not a whole lot of AI, right? There's a little,
That is
you
true.
didn't actually touch on it, but there's some AI image generation from
Exactly.
what you have, but there's not
Hmm.
much else. Do you
Yep.
see, but you also mentioned, a place maybe an MCP server, things like that. Do you see a
Hmm.
bigger role for AI or going forward, and what role would that be?
Correct. Yeah. Uh, so yeah, AI is changing everything. We've been talking about this for a while. I mean, you guys have a great tool in Veris as well too. I think one thing that we see this unlocking, just actually relevant for the CG community here, things that used to take 2 weeks or a week of actual model, like in order to get the presentation rendering looking
Oh
right,
yeah.
you had to model so much
Oh,
stuff.
and it
You
wasn't
know,
just the time it took to model it and the tools. It's also the time it took to get the knowledge to do that. You're seeing things come out of AI now where you get the golden light. You actually see the dust motes in the air. You're seeing um, just like certain reflections and volumetrics. I mean, try doing that with like that takes some serious skill with traditional rendering
mhm,
tools, and now you're able
right.
to do it with a reference and a prompt.
Which is a blessing and a curse, maybe. Like I think there's some. I mean, to go back in my day, you had to walk uphill both ways in the snow to do this kind of rendering. Like there's some amount of rigor and like care and intentionality when you have to think about it some more. That
And
hopefully
I
that
think
doesn't
those
go
still
away.
matter though,
Yeah.
right? You still don't, I don't think a client is going to be impressed by 12 images that are decent when it could be one
Mhm.
that's perfect.
Yeah. So back to the AI strategy and story, like clearly this is a massive disruptive opportunity here that I mean obviously, you guys have invested in, like everybody's doing it. But one thing that we see is just in the normal technology adoption life cycle, like so to go old school for a second. So there's a concept called crossing the chasm, Jeffrey Moore Langdon book. And part of that is that there's basically a bell curve. There's
Yeah.
always going to be the people that are on the bleeding edge, like the innovators, the visionary kind of people, early adopters. Um, those are the guys for AI rendering as a small subtext of the larger AI story, those are the guys that were in like comfy UI and using Hugging Face and like, stable diffusion kind of stuff. Like they were like downloading things and running Python and
Yeah,
doing
they
this
were
crazy
seeing
stuff.
opportunities where other people are just seeing spaghetti hands.
Yeah. So they're like, look, I spent the whole weekend and I came up with one of these things. But now we're at a point where these models are matured, and we can talk about the AI kind of underpinnings of this a little bit more. It's not just LLMs, like large language models, like these image-based models are
Oh
actually
yeah, the sort of
really
the
pretty
visual
good.
language models, as they call it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So VLMs, exactly. Um, they have advanced, and how can we capitalize on that as an industry? It's not about the tech. It's not about the hardcore solving the hard problem and wiring it up manually. It's about ease of use. It's about solving the
Yeah,
architecture
it's the
problem.
accessibility of those pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's a
So,
question though: what have you had to pivot then? I mean, you
mhm,
look at the AI tech. Obviously, you're not developing a
mhm,
lot of the, like for instance,
mhm,
what you're showing right now from a visual perspective.
yeah.
But have you seen AI tech emerge or become so developed, like for instance, the Claude agents and things like
Mhm,
that, right? And you saw sort
yeah.
of a dramatic
Mhm,
shift in market cap for some companies as a
mhm,
response to that. Has there been tech that's come out since you guys launched where you're like, ooh, let's do a pivot here. Like the
mhm.
ground is shifted underneath our feet, and we're going to be responsive to this, and take advantage or not do this or what have you because of the how rapidity of AI technology.
Yeah, totally. I mean, obviously, the large language models are an important part to this. It's hard not to use them in some way, right? And like I just taught a class on this, like what's the difference between like ChatGPT and Claude and all these other
Mhm.
things. Um, the fun part in architecture is we have a lot of structured and unstructured information that you can feed into these things, and you can summarize, you can find things, all that stuff. You'll see some of those from us soon. Um, but the larger challenge is thinking about kind of like the way that you said, like LLM to VLM, like these visual language models, like or large models, like if you think about the vector problem, like you have these tools don't really understand 2D CAD or 3D geometry that
Not
well.
currently, no.
So I think that that's one of the changes. And you start to see these image to 3D things or 3D to image. Like
Yeah, it's
that's a little
starting to
bit.
happen. Yeah.
Mhm. So I think that back to your point, like we haven't really pivoted. It's always been our strategy, and we have a team that's actively not just using the current models from other people, but we're developing our own foundational models because we have to, because they don't exist.
So
So
what's an example of a model that or a problem
mhm.
you needed to solve and you created a model to do that where it didn't exist?
Well, I can't really get too much into the details of that
We'll
one
try to skim
either.
over the top enough that
Yeah.
it gives us something to sink
Yeah.
our teeth
So I
into.
think, like taking back to that example of like architects are visual creatures. They think in sketching and concepts and geometry. How do you make that, how do you help these tools unlock or empower the larger design process? Isn't new. That's not an IP thing that we have. That's just a, general space that people are in. And that's sort of the next big opportunity. And whether some individual company cracks that nut by generating a model or by linking into something in a new, different way, I think we'll see. But for now, it's not just about like, connecting to Claude or something else. I mean, clearly we should talk about MCPs too. Like
Yeah.
there's access to information that's super interesting, but even that's like just an unlock to the next thing. Like
It's the
once
unlock
you
next
have
thing,
those
but it
connectors.
opens up the opportunity for people to develop their own tools that may go beyond what
Mhm.
you anticipate. I mean, that's one of the things
Yeah.
where I think about is like architects are always creating new tools.
Hmm.
And they're always going to ask questions where like you can't have an answer for everyone. And that's one of the
Hmm.
challenges I find, at least at Chaos, is like
Hmm.
someone requests a feature, like, boy, that's a really cool idea.
Hmm.
But there's 6 people that need that feature.
Yeah.
And that's something where I love the idea of AI being, okay, we
Mhm.
can't develop that, but you can,
But what
via you
if
create your own
the
agent to do that.
UI exactly, what if the UI kind of went away and you're just dealing with agents, or the UI morphs itself based on the task? Like, we've done this before. Like it's almost like, I mean, back in like the days, like even before Google, there was this thing called Yahoo, and Yahoo's whole deal was like, we are basically organizing the world's information, I think was their tagline. And that you think about it, they created a hierarchy of information, an ontology of like structured, all of this stuff fits
Yeah.
into some construct, like a tree. And Google came in and said, we're not going to do that. We're just going to search, and we're going to index and query, and you can find your search
Yeah.
results. It's kind of the same thing here. Like instead of handling a specific workflow for a specific user in a specific domain. Like contractors think differently than architects, and you have to build UI for that. I mean, obviously it's easier to do that in the cloud and web versus desktop. You don't have to ship 6 different UIs on a CD anymore. But what if you don't have to do that level of intentional thought to create a workflow that handles like the change order process for contractors? Because that's a whole team for whatever 6 months to do that. What if you just said, great, you can morph your UI based on a prompt? And
Yeah, so
you know
you're
that
seeing a real role for generative AI in this context. Essentially you can make the tool, the canvas is infinite, and so is the tool,
why
depending upon
not?
what your
I mean,
need.
I think that that's an interesting opportunity that I'm sure people are working on today,
Well, they're
not just
trying to in
us.
different fields, but as
Yeah.
you mentioned, you look at what your requirements were, right? Ease
Yeah.
of use, the speed, things like that. Like it's easy to say, a whole different deal to make it actually happen.
I mean, that was a great quote. I think it was Zuckerberg said, like there were these guys, the Winklevoss twins that, they were early people in Facebook, investors, and lawsuit and everything. And they basically said, well, Facebook was our idea, and he said, Becky Zuckerberg said, like, well, if you were able to make Facebook, you should have made Facebook. Like, it's like
Yeah.
it's not about the idea, it's about the
It's about
execution.
the execution. I know. I
You
mean,
know.
it's easy to think. I remember some movie where it was like that, where they're trying to say like, oh, I went back in time and invented Google or something like that, and you're like,
Hmm.
you asked me to invent Google. I'm like, well, I can give you the name,
Yeah.
and sort of the broad strokes of the concept. That's worth a lot.
Yeah. So basically, I think about these things as far as ideas are great, but throw as many ideas out as possible, get feedback from a community. And that's what I really like about the
So what
CG
did you
community.
do then? That feedback from the community was
Hmm.
like, ooh, we got to stop this, pivot. Did that happen at any point here?
Yeah, I think I think probably one of the ones that we saw was the aspirational thinking that everyone wants to think about things in 3D and resolve problems in 3D
Hmm.
met the harsh reality of like, I have a project architect that only thinks in drawings still.
Yeah,
It's like,
no, I mean, what
you
is it?
know,
It's like 40% of
yeah.
our buildings are designed using auto or basically
Yeah.
2D CAD, and that hasn't budged.
Yeah, and it's not even like that they're designing it. It's just like they know they have a team of like 12 people working on Revit stuff, but the only interface that they ever have is like a PDF check set and
Yeah, well, that's
Bluebeam,
true.
you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's just kind of going where the market is. Like you can have all the hopes and dreams and aspirations you want about how the thing should change, but you're going to hit the harsh reality of like how people need to work, what they care about, you know?
How often then are you engaging with customers for the feedback? I mean, is this something that is absolutely like it's a true continual process
Daily.
of
Yeah.
daily? Yeah.
So what we have, we're a small startup. We have active, customers like partners around the world. Um, And what we're seeing is that, we're still in early adopter kind of phase. The people we're working with are actively using these things on projects. We're working with them not just to solve bugs, but to hear what they care about, what they don't want. And a lot of that is obviously over, Zoom and things like that. But more importantly, it's just the FaceTime with people, right? So sitting with people in an office, we have the benefit of being a remote company, primarily, East Coast, West Coast, US, but people all around the world. But the benefit is a lot of our customers are accessible to us. Like I live an hour outside of New York. You might have seen my Wawa
Yeah,
coffee cup,
exactly.
So Rod and I are both like kind of like Philly kind of regional areas. But the benefit of that is that I can get into New York in an hour, and go pop into like 2 or 3 offices. A lot of our colleagues are in Boston or New York or San Francisco. So that helps us have that immediacy and that connection with our customers and our partners. And I think
So there's an
with
element of almost continuous discovery that's happening here then.
yeah, and it's also like you've probably seen this too. Like there's the list of requirements or requests that people have. It's like here's 5 things you guys need to do. That's like what they promoted in their own internal dialogue and like editing process. But what you see when you're in an office is actually much more interesting. It's
It's
like the
true, yeah.
observational part versus what people want to tell you. Um, and you see stuff like we used to call it invisible work. It's like, well, why are you doing these 3 things over here that took you like 2 hours? You're like, well, that's just what we do.
So you're literally observing then in some of these
Mm.
cases. You're actually,
Yeah,
it's not just like, oh, we're sitting in a conference room, having a coffee and discussing. It's actually sort of sitting at someone's desk, watching workflows, watching how they
totally.
engage your software, things like that.
And that's a huge part of our culture, Rod. Like in this company, we are not just technologists. Like we are not just people that clearly like we build software and we get it out as fast as possible. We iterate, But in order to know what you're iterating towards, you need to know your market. As a business person, you need to
Mhm.
know it from a product management standpoint, and you need to instinctively and intuitively understand the native user. And the thing is, you don't know that until you spend a lot of time with people. And that's where the user-centered design part and the real focus on design as a concept, like, we have user experience people. I've done that before. I've run teams like that. We have people on our staff that do a lot of that are heavily focused on that. And it's not just those people. It's like our engineers, our
Yeah,
product
everyone's
managers,
got to have that mindset.
and even like we have, obviously you have customer support and, those kind of people. So we're all in this to say, look, how do we make these guys successful? How do we listen to them actively and make sure we're not just solving like the top line problem, but the deeper inherent problems that they have?
So one of the things I'm thinking of here from the perspective of a chaos is, we have a huge
Hmm.
number of visual artists that are customers as
Hmm.
well, right? And their responsibility is making or helping communicate the design in a way that, has an
Hmm.
emotional element, has a
Yeah.
realism element, things like
Hmm.
that. Do you see a role for them in the context of Motif? Or do you think that is a profession with a trajectory that may make a person a little nervous?
I think those people they're always going to be the tastemakers. Like, you think about it that way. Like, there's the vision, kind of the concept architect, the concept design person that doesn't really care about the tectonics and the structural details and all that stuff, but they express the intent, they express the emotion, they sell the thing. That's hugely important. Like, architects and engineers are inherently service-based industry. You always are living on the quality of your ideas and how you can communicate them to other people.
Mhm.
So, and obviously it's a visual medium, right? So like, they're super important. They need to be part of this process more than before. I
But it's a
mean,
different role in some ways. Maybe it's less technical in some ways, and maybe it's more about
yeah,
how
I
you
think it'll
frame
always
the
be a little.
information for communication.
Yeah, I think it'll always be a little less technical. And I mean, it depends on the type of practice you have. Like, some kind of big A architects might, say, I'm not going to be bothered with all those details because I just sell the idea, and there's going to be an architect of record that figures out that stuff,
Yeah.
right? Other people are like heavily into like the craft and say, we're not going to even show it until we know how to build it.
So there's a question that's coming in from the audience here, and I
Mhm.
mentioned actually in our sort of pre-call sync here
Mhm.
about World Lab and the idea
Yeah.
of that the investment Autodesk made. So as a former
Mhm. Yeah,
Autodesk
right.
insider, right, you might have some insight on that one. But it gets to
Yeah.
this question of 2D text,
Mhm.
things like that we're seeing with the AI side of things. But then
Mhm.
all of a sudden now we're starting to see the potential for 3D via
Mhm.
AI. And obviously your customers and you see huge value in 3D in addition to
Mhm.
2D. But where do you see that going as far as sort of, prompt to geometry even?
Yeah, I think, let me find a good case here. So because we're in such a visual medium and architects think in 3D so much, I think that needs to get unlocked. And I really think that the World Lab guys are onto something. I mean, their technology is amazing. Like, we know some of the people there. Um,
But it doesn't have the
Matt,
dimensional accuracy, right? That
it
people
doesn't.
think. Is that matter? Do you think? I
Well,
mean, do you think
and
you
that's
can sort
kind
of
of
drape
like,
it with mesh and and start from there,
yeah, I
start to
mean, so
extract
like,
out?
so we like, without geeking out too much, there are these concepts called nerfs and
Yeah.
splats that are pretty interesting in this space. And the cool thing about this is that a lot of them are like, there's this thing called a sign distance field, which is pretty neat because it's a math equation that basically defines like your geometry, as opposed to like meshes that have all the vertices, or B reps, which have like these crazy analytic solids that, need to get combined in a big math problem. You can have something that looks amazing, that's super small to transmit, that you can still interact with, but it's a little bit like Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Like, it's like, you can't really have, it's like this wave particle duality. Like, it's not really real in terms of like the
Yeah, right. It doesn't
architecture.
have the true
Yeah.
dimensional accuracy to build, but it can
Mhm.
look like you're building.
Exactly. So that's amazing. Like, think about it from a context standpoint, or just throwing in entourage and things like that. That's great. If you tried to say, how big is that desk? It's hard for it to answer that. But I think that there are ways, without getting too much into it, that those worlds can bridge. It's almost the same as like,
Well, that's what
in
people are
like,
saying. There's potential maybe you could put a mesh over a splat, which isn't too
yeah.
hard, right? And then you could use basically a boundary representation model if you wanted to get
Yeah.
somewhat technical from that to
Mhm.
be able to extract out the information. And my understanding, like, the boundary representation model is the mechanism by which you're able to create the geometry in the context of Revit, right? They have their own
Yeah.
kernel for
Mhm.
doing that.
Exactly. So Revit is a 3D solid modeler. Every extrusion or revolve or blend or any feature you make, like walls and windows and doors, are 3D solids that you can slice through. And that concept is basically you have analytical curves, like a smooth curve. You have smooth surfaces and solids. That's what's called a boundary representation modeler. Um, the other type of modelers are mesh modelers, where you basically say, like SketchUp is a good example. Like you don't really end up like an arc wall is always going to be faceted, right? So there's always going to be a representational difference. You can make those facets kind of like go away geographically, but they're still there.
Yeah.
So that is a great way to model. Like meshes are great, but they have inherent limitations because you can't really upsample them back to the smooth thing that well. It's like it's like a copy of a copy of
Hmm.
a copy kind of thing. Going from an analytical smooth thing down to a mesh is usually lossy. The thing about these new technologies is that they don't have to be. If you have this math problem, like you could figure out a way to construct either a mesh or a B-rep from those math equations. And that's one of the areas that I think people are working in a lot.
I like that you
Um,
can go both directions, right? You can have something
mhm,
maybe that's for the purpose of documentation, something that's just for the
mhm.
purpose of visualization, because they don't necessarily have to be the same. I mean, people are already
Yeah,
creating splinter models for visualization only, right? But it'd be
yeah,
nice if it's all pulling from the same inherent data set in some
yeah. And
ways.
I think that other people have done that. I mean, obviously, NVIDIA has done a lot with the sort of omniverse stuff that has been out for a while. Like there's ways to think about the structure of the information that's even less about the geometry. It's more about how you express the idea of like, here's a building component,
Yeah.
and you basically pull out the information that you need. Maybe sometimes you need just a mesh, like for visualization. Other times you're trying to run, like a CNC device, and you need like something
Yeah.
smooth to
Yeah.
make the G code.
Micro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think all those
Micrometers.
things
Yeah.
are true, but the world is changing. And back to the World Lab thing, I mean, those guys are pretty great. I think that the emphasis, and this has happened, I don't know, a couple times in the world, like where you take a big tech provider like Google, and all of a sudden they're into 3D stuff, right? I mean, they bought SketchUp back in the day,
Yeah.
or then that basically came from, like, they had Google Earth and they needed a way to populate information in Google Earth. So like thinking about these big tech things, which is all about indexing information, there's so much information in our models, like in architecture engineering models, that people need to interact with. And sometimes it's just cursory, like I
Oh,
have a
I
street
like this
map,
point.
you
Yeah,
know?
it's like the meta. You can interact with metadata. You don't have to
Mhm.
have that actually be part of the geometry and things
Yeah.
like that, right? You just need the geometry is almost like a visual mechanism of finding the information you want.
Yeah. So, and that's usually, I think that's the bigger play, is like, how do you literally make this 3D subset of the world more approachable to like the mass market? There's a reason why Google Maps, if you zoom in enough, you start to see the 3D scene of San Francisco
Yeah.
or whatever. People are inherently visual and understand spatial orientation, but they're not like, not everybody's architect, right? So like, how do you make that stuff approachable? And that's where back to the World Lab thing is interesting, because you can have a different representation of this stuff that might even be more approachable.
I mean, that
Um,
explains why you have NVIDIA and Autodesk coming in from
yeah.
very different directions, right? Autodesk, where you're thinking maybe the AC side.
Hmm.
NVIDIA is probably trying to create worlds to train robots or something like that, right?
Yeah.
In a very different use
Hmm.
case, but they both see applicability.
Yeah. And yeah, don't even want to go into like digital twins and all that stuff, but
Yeah.
like, it's actually pretty, I mean, that's an overused term, but it's so important these days. Like, we were making, before anybody that was using Revit was making a digital twin. You're building the design in the computer in a way that makes sense before you build it in real life,
Yeah.
right? So, and that happens in manufacturing a lot too. I think you'll see more of that, and more importantly, just mirroring the world around you without even things you're going to try and create or design.
Makes
Like,
me
you're just,
wonder where Motif's going next, right?
well,
It's
yeah, I mean, think about it even in terms of like reality capture stuff, right? I
yeah,
mean, like, if you can like literally take your phone and scan right now with the sensors that are in whatever, like a billion devices now, can construct 3D reality.
yeah, right. And
What does
then
that
yeah,
mean?
can you upload that, create a splat from that, and then all of a sudden you're able to target or tag portions of that splat with metadata to make it navigable with an additional layer of data
Mhm.
richness.
Yeah. And then, I mean, getting back to like sharing that stuff in the community around it, like, what if that is useful, like the number of times you had to like find information to make a context model or download something or use GIS or go find some weird old PDF. Like what if
Yeah,
all
have a
that
subscription to
information?
Cesium. Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Cesium guys are great. I mean, let's talk about another like local boy done good. Like they're another
Yeah.
Philly company, but obviously, and then got bought by Bentley. But so like the approachability of these models and just the general expectation from users. A lot of this actually coming from movies and games too. Like they're the stimuli that have come into people's brains, like not just about the professional thing, but like there's just an expectation. Like think about like Minority Report or anything else to do with like, accessibility of 3D information and incorporating that into your daily life. That's just an expectation.
I know
And
that.
then,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's the part I was thinking here is like, okay, what's sort of this thing that ties this conversation together? But what's
Hmm.
fascinating to me is you really started off with this idea of like culture
Hmm.
is driving expectations, and those
Hmm.
expectations drive tool development.
Yeah.
And that's pretty fascinating to see how that loop is happening.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the key thing. So, I think at the cultural level, I mentioned that at the top of the hour, we see remarkable cultural changes happening in the companies that we're working with. And it's not, I hate to use the Gen X stuff or generational stuff. It's not a matter of that. It's just a matter of like people's expectations of tools are different than they
Yeah.
were 20 years ago. So how do we go there and how do we approach the way design is happening? People work differently together than they did before. And how we inside of Motif, how do we structure our company to also have a new culture like that? Like if we, I mean, going back to the AI stuff for a second, um, there are ways to build software that are hard and rigid sometimes, and then some that are looser. So it's almost like in architecture practice, there's design, bid, build, like where
Yes.
you go through this heavy design process and
Yeah, it's sort of this,
schematic,
yeah,
conceptual,
and then,
yeah, and
yeah,
then you
and
end up.
yeah, it starts very loose, and then by the end, it's a very rigid set of ideas,
Yeah, so
manifest in a
you
drawing
drop
set.
like a big drawing set on the street and
Yeah,
you give it to like 5 contractors and they take it apart and estimate it and go through a month of stuff and then they give you a number back. And that number is always bigger than you expect. And then bad
yeah,
things happen.
or
People
it's
start
lower
yelling
than
at
you
each other.
expect, and then they're going to make it up in change orders. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yes, exactly. So maybe they come in with a change order thing. But either way, like that artifact is inherently wrong and not going to be what's built.
and
So
and it
why
is,
even
but
spend
it
all the
is
time to do
also
that?
supposed to reflect intent, right? That's, and
Yeah.
then the contractor is responsible for means and methods. So there's weird sort of contractual dance that you have also.
Yeah. So in a way, I mean, for those of the people that are not building software that are coming from, different design industries, software can be built the same way, where there's a heavy contractual thing. There's like a big document that gets right, and then a bunch of little documents, and then people start making code, and it's like, ugh, like almost by sheer force of will, something happens, and then you
Yeah.
ship it, and then you realize it's wrong. It's the wrong thing. You built the wrong thing for the wrong
Well, that's
customer.
where we're seeing AI just throw it out the window. I
Yeah.
mean, I one of our co-founders, Vlado, had a T-shirt, and
Hmm.
he has great T-shirts, and one of them has a little
Hmm.
line, and it says, "What does it say?" It says, um, "I think it's something like months of coding will save weeks of planning, or something like that."
Yeah, totally. Which
You
is
know,
the opposite of what you had to think,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
But now it's getting to the point actually where with particularly we're starting to see a change even internally where people are actually
Mhm.
going right to code
Yeah,
using AI agents and
totally.
using that instead as a planning mechanism. Um,
Yeah. And
and
that's where I was going to go. So like
yeah,
you go from like traditional design bid build to something that's more like integrated project development, which is like IPD, which is like a little bit more free love, like people are working together contractually better. And then there's like the next level beyond that, which is probably more like design build or whatever. But on the software side, you go from like traditional what's called waterfall development, which is like the heavy thing,
yeah.
to agile, which was about what people have been doing for the last 10, 15 years. And now that's even changing where we go into like, you know, pejoratively called vibe coding.
Yeah.
I would call it more like AI assisted coding or whatever. But
Well, that
like
sounds
for
better.
me,
I'm definitely doing vibe coding. Let's be honest
yeah.
here. But yes,
And,
other people are
like
doing
you
AI
can,
assisted coding.
yeah, you can do different things. But like instead of writing a 20-page document and having these great details and like Figma pixel perfect stuff to communicate design intent and sitting down with people that are like skeptical and saying, I don't think we should do it that way or whatever, that turns into a long process. Um, if you can give an interactive prototype, even if it is still a prototype, like it's not production code, um, that gets the intent across faster. I mean, it's like a picture's worth 1,000 words. An interactive prototype is 1,000,000 words.
So
Like so.
what you're proposing here though is an actual fundamental shift in the way that buildings are designed. Then you're
I
saying
think that, yeah,
it's changing and it's going to change fast.
the practical application here could be, what if you could vibe code a building? Or what if it's not even about the creation process? I mean, clearly you can do that now in a bunch of these tools, like, take a building program and lay out the
Yeah.
building spaces so I can sugar cube them together and whatever. That's like fine, but that's like the basic demo. What I'm interested in, Rod, is I want to say, I drew this one wall detail. I want you to find the other conditions that are like that and, autocomplete those details for me, or figure out the logical implication of this system that I designed. What are the impacts of that? Like, what if I
Yeah,
could
in
say,
this context, for this
yeah,
typology, that kind of thing. Like, yeah,
mhm,
I mean, actually, basically, you're saying you're co-designing the building with AI.
yeah, and there are many prestigious big companies that have 10 researchers that are doing stuff like this already, and you could do this computationally before with Grasshopper and Rhino and Python and C Sharp. Doesn't matter, like
Yeah,
but
but it
that
didn't hit your
doesn't
ease of use
scale.
requirement or your speed
Yeah.
requirement, right?
Yeah. So
And it was
like
a
the
tool
number of
for the
times that
big
I've worked
boys.
with people, they're like, hey, I got to show you this thing. And they show me like this building configurator thing, or like, look, you can switch from like steel mid-rise thing to concrete and it'll tell you what the cost is going to be. Like, that's great. But that works for like one use case in one company. Like, what if you could take that imperative, like conditional logic that somebody had to write and teach, an AI about that? Like, and it
Yeah,
and
that's fundamentally
extrapolates.
changing the way you're designing a building,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
And
that is,
it's gonna be wrong. And that's the fun thing too. And scary for us as architects and engineers. Bad things happen when buildings are, you can't hallucinate the structural system in
you
a
can't
building,
hallucinate the structural system, right? There's still components that everything in a building has to be done right, for sure, right?
Mhm.
For liability reasons, for health, safety, and welfare reasons. But it should also be acknowledged that even when the humans were doing it just on their own, they weren't always doing it right.
That's true. And it's also like the iterative process that we were talking about before. So what if you could ask those what if questions faster and iterate through, my Phil Bernstein is a eminent person in the industry that, he's one of my old bosses at Autodesk and a friend. um, when we were doing generative design stuff, so before LLMs came out, like you could still use like genetic algorithms and come up with these different options and parametric models. He's like, great, Matt, what you did is you made the ability to make an endless array of useless options. So like, why should I care? Like,
Yeah.
what benefit is that? And the benefit is that it's not about generating them. It's about the discriminator. It's about how do you find the good ones?
Yeah, you
Um,
curate it. Yeah.
yeah, and by extension, in this LLM kind of vibe coding space, the way that I describe these things to people is these agents, these agentic workflows, they're kind of like semi-useful interns. Like
That's
they're,
exactly how I describe it
you
as
know,
well. Yes.
like I just describe, like when I describe this to like my grandma or whoever else, it's like, okay, it's, imagine you have like a person that's like the overly optimistic, like sophomore or junior in college, that like even when they're like writing a paper, like think about like ChatGPT or something like that. Like, hey, go research this thing and come up with this proposal for me. Okay, I did that. Great. And then it like fundamentally missed the plot, but it
But it's
sounds
got some
happy
good
about it.
stuff in there, though. You know, you can extract, you can guide from there. I mean, it's,
Yeah, so you have, and that it almost turns into like Socratic method, like great idea. Let's go back to first principles. Like, what is your research agenda? All that kind of stuff. But
yeah.
like, if you think about it in terms of like the optimism and the way, I mean, there's these reward functions that are built into these tools, which is, um, another whole fun topic to talk about. But like, they're overly optimistic. They think they have the right answer when they really don't. They hallucinate, and they're somewhat sycophantic, like, because that's the
Yeah.
reward function.
Great
They're trying to
question.
get you
Great
to
question,
engage.
Rod. Like, really? Are you sure about that? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like I want them to say that's
Yeah.
can,
It's like,
I'm
how
not
about
sure if
you're
I can
just
curse on
wasting
your
your time here. Yeah.
can I curse on your podcast? But like,
I think so. I doubt there's any
okay,
kids watching this. And if they are,
well, that,
yeah.
sometimes you have a shitty idea,
Oh,
and it
yeah.
should tell you that. So I think that's the thing that we need to care about in this industry. But like, there's an amazing, back to the endless array of somewhat useful interns and options. Like, if you can, with no cost to yourself, generate more ideas and come up with better ones faster, that's a great idea. And then you become basically a manager of your agents.
Yeah, you come. Yeah. It's like, hey, everyone's got a team now.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
why not? As long as you can set those goals up correctly. And we always think about like the vibe coding versus AI assisted stuff is like, if you give it a one line prompt, it's a little bit of a garbage in, garbage out kind of stuff. Like it's not gonna have enough information, enough context. If you give it 10 requirements it has to hit and 5 things to research beforehand, chances are it's probably gonna work a little bit better. Um, so I think that that's a cultural shift. And also a lot of that comes back to the domain models that I was talking about. Like if you can say, go find a detail that looks like this, like that's an interesting thing that I know probably about 5 startups are working on right now.
It's
But that
true,
requires,
yeah.
yeah,
But part of it there also is like, okay, how do you create the new knowledge in that context? Like a large firm's gonna
yeah,
have a big repository of data that they can mine from and apply.
yeah.
It's gonna get harder and harder, I would imagine, for smaller firms, and that's where I wonder when do we get to the
Yeah.
point where some of these tools can help the small guys, the ones that are just starting out to be able to compete, even if they don't have this repository of knowledge that's usually required to develop these AI
Mhm.
capabilities. They're not
Yeah.
going to have a bunch of details. They may know how to make a nice detail, but they're not going to have a
Mhm.
library of details.
And that's where we think, like, back to the culture thing, that's where we as a small startup, obviously we're working with big names around the world, but like we like working with the little guys. Like we like working with small to mid-sized companies. I mean, if you look at like the bell curve distribution of architects and engineers, like
Oh,
a
it's
lot of
well, at
small,
least with
yeah,
architects, tiny firms. Yeah.
exactly right. So like this is a force multiplier. Like what I think here, what we're trying to do is unlock the whole, the sole practitioner up to like whatever 20, 30 people that may not have a dedicated IT person or dedicated CAD person or BIM or computational person. They just need to get their job done. How do they do that better?
Yeah.
How can we unlock that next level of productivity and design creativity and just fun, joy in practice again? I think that that's the super interesting thing to do.
I love it. I think that's a good note to end on. The joy of design and practice. That's
Hmm.
wonderful. Matt, great conversation. I really want to do this again so we can get into the idea of the reward structure
Hmm.
and how you might actually be integrating some aspects of that, particularly the
Yeah.
gamification side and things. I mean, there's so
Hmm.
many different threads I'd love to pull on, but I'd say for a startup conversation, really appreciate the transparency, the
Hmm.
insight, the challenges that you're facing, all of it. Wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me on. And I really, like I said, I'm a big fan of everything you're doing at Chaos, and the collaboration that we've had, and also this new thing that you're doing with CG relaunch. I think that's amazing. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.